I love hooting. Hooting is good. There you go. Well, thank you, Cynthia, for the great introduction. Julia, you're amazing. Kerry, thank you. It is great to be here with all of you. And one of the reasons I'm here is because you guys got to support Silent Spring. There's a couple of reasons for that, and you should sort of read newspapers and you can figure it out. If Silent Spring doesn't need support today, I don't know when it needs it. Science needs support today. We need one another to stick together today. And you know, the best thing I like about Silent Spring is it's personal. It means something to each and every one of us, because all of us has lost somebody to breast cancer that we loved. And we cannot tolerate a disinvestment in research that is so important to human lives. And the thing I love the best about Silent Spring is they do not live up to their name. They are not silent. And you know what? None of us can be today. If you take nothing home more from what I say, it's that. It is time for us to speak our minds. This is our country. We need to take it back. That's it. I can remember when Silent Spring started in 1994. It just seems like yesterday, doesn't it? They're still doing the same thing. Can they get this right? I mean, for crying out loud. No, it was. I mean, they really blossomed into a wonderfully effective organization. You know, I always, in my head, I still have them down the Cape. You know, that's where I see you. But I'm reading all the things that they're doing now with endocrine disruptors, with looking at what you find in household dust. And nothing could be more disturbing to me than to see that you're finding DDT, chlordane, chlorpyrifos in the dust in people's homes. I guess that's why they call them persistent, but that's kind of annoying as well as persistent. You know, all the work they're doing on phthalates, and what really amused me was the work they're doing on packaging of fast foods. I just think that's piling on, don't you? I mean, fast foods in and of itself is terrible. Do you have to complain about the packaging that goes along with it? But they do an incredibly difficult job at a time when people really don't want to hear bad news. They want to hear solutions and they'd like them tomorrow. But they deal with issues that aren't visible, things that you need to do actual long research and work and hard science on. And that doesn't suit people today. They see a problem, they want an answer tomorrow. But guess what? That's science. That's fact. That's something you can rely on to protect the people that you care about and your children that are coming up and your grandchildren. That's what we need today. And I'll tell you, too many people think that they can actually rely on government to protect everybody. Well, I hate to tell you, the lack of protection didn't start with this year. It's always been difficult to get at these issues. We need to do a whole lot of science in order to regulate things and in order to protect people. I can remember early on in Massachusetts, when I was working at Environmental Affairs, and we were doing mercury takebacks. Do you remember the thermometers that had the glass ones with it? So I'm working my butt off, you know, giving out digitals, delivering all these scooping up all the glass ones and delivering them. And I went home and my sister-in-law was there and she said, Gina, why are you working so hard on this? I said, because it's really dangerous. Mercury is really bad for you. It's a neurotoxin. She said, well, Gina, that's sort of ridiculous. I said, really, why? She said, because the government would never allow something that bad to be in a glass thing and give it to me when I have a baby and I take it home with me. I'm like, hello, I work in the government. This is a problem, folks. They still think that you can destroy everything that we've done to protect public health and everybody will just be okie dokie with it. You know that's not people. People are so narrow, and they think they'd love to think that government takes care of it all. Well, we in government know that's not the case. We rely on things like science and fact. When we're doing our jobs, we rely on things like science and fact. So the most fun about going out and giving these speeches is I was in government for 37 years. Now I am Gina unfettered. You know, my journey on this chemical stuff, which I've taken with many people in this room, has been a very long one. And I have learned some lessons that have been very valuable to me. And I'd like to just share a couple of them, because one of my first jobs was in the town of Canton. I worked for the Board of Health there. I was, thank you, 26 years old. Really cool job. I had no idea what it did, and I still probably don't, because I probably didn't do it. But I did a good job, I think. But the first thing, one of the things that happened like the first year I was there is that we uncovered this PCB contamination. A lot of barrels of PCBs were dumped. And people in a neighborhood near there decided that they thought that that was the reason for excess cancer in their neighborhood. And I realized this, I lived in the town of Canton. The people in that neighborhood were my friends parents. And they were really worried. And the lesson I learned was that as soon as you're in government this comes up, if you can't give them a positive answer right away, then you've got a black hat on you right away. These are friends that I've known for ages. It is a difficult spot to be in. But what I've learned is that percentages, saying it's likely or very likely, doesn't cut it when people's health is threatened. They want to know with certainty whether or not this caused their problems. And I also learned that it's complicated, because when I went up to talk about it, we all got through this and we lived to talk about it. But the challenge I faced was when I actually did my own epi study. It was really cool. I liked it. I only got 2 things wrong, probably the fundamental stuff, but it was good. You know, what I found was, because you're in a small town, I look at birth certificates and you plot it and you look at ages and what goes together, what you suspect PCBs do, blah, 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 blah. And what I found then was that there was probably not a problem in that neighborhood, but there was an extraordinarily high level of breast cancer in the town. You know why? Because we had a rubber company in the middle of that town. And I can remember as a kid that I went to school at St. John's School right next to that rubber company. And whenever they were manufacturing, the nuns would go over and shut the windows so that we wouldn't have the smell permeating everything. But we did anyways. It doesn't, and you sit there, and I lost a good friend to to brain cancer at the age of 38. She had 3 young children, and she survived long enough to have her 4th. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, we can all be worried. This isn't just about a single neighborhood. This is about the way in which we have grown our industries in this country, about a lack of understanding of the threats that we're facing and how to deal with those. And the challenges we face today are even more difficult than had we known about the challenges with this particular company, because you can't smell the stuff that kills us now. You can't see it. You can't taste it. It is in the products that we sit on and that are in our houses. That's the challenge that Silent Spring has to face every day. And if you think that is easy, it's not. And if you think somebody else is picking up this cause and running with it, they are not. So you have to sit here and think about what you can do to be part of the voices that make Silent Spring not silent. I then moved to the Hazardous Waste Facility Site Safety Council. Joan Gardner, thank you for getting me into state government. Where are you, Joan? Select woman, I should say, again. I really want to tell you the Hazardous Waste Facility Site Safety Council was an eye-opener in many respects as well, because what I realized is that when you talk to people about hazardous waste facilities, they'll hate one and love another, and it makes no sense scientifically. I don't know why, but people go on instinct. but they need to rely on science. And if you think you can take away credible science in the United States of America and still protect the people in this country, you are dead wrong, because science isn't about gut instinct, it's about fact. And that comes really hard to come by. And what I remembered in the toxic use reduction program, Rich, Cynthia, Jody, you're out there. I love you people. It was one of the biggest lessons that I learned. First of all, I learned that companies take on the persona of the people that run it. So that if you're in the private sector, do not tell me that your only ability to make progress is by coming here and donating money. We need the private sector to step up now more than ever before. You can be listened to. You can make change. You can do your best with your company. Because I found the most brilliant human beings doing the best stuff when I was in the toxic use reduction program. And I also found tons of companies that had no idea what it cost to produce the product they were selling. I found companies that the only reason why they were actually doing anything was because it was regulated. And I found companies, God love them, that the only reason they were doing it was because they got their name in the paper on a list of saying who the biggest toxic use users were in the state, and they didn't want to be in the top 10. That's when I learned that transparency is everything. Information drives change just as much as government drives changes. It's just like Weight Watchers, right? Weight Watchers was successful because you had to weigh in with your friends, right? You couldn't cheat, God damn it, what are you gonna do? And it's the same with businesses. So there's lessons that I've taken with me in life on this little journey, and they're important lessons because you're really out to change a culture of how you do business. You're really here to make people understand the connection between the world they live in and their health and the health of their children. And when I went to EPA, it was a wonderful opportunity for me because everybody thinks EPA is a birds and bunnies agency in polar bears. That was it. Now, I will tell you all, I love birds, I love bunnies, and I love polar bears. I just don't do them. What I do is public health. We are actually the Public Health Protection Agency. Our stock and trade is how many people have lived longer lives and how many have been able to be healthier longer. That's what clean air is about. That's what clean water is about. That is actually what carbon pollution reduction is about. And if anybody tells you any different, they are absolutely dead wrong. And we can't allow that to be said. So we went there and we figured out the same thing that Julie was talking about. ToxCast is it. Transparency is it. Do a quick screen. It actually changed the way companies did their chemicals. Because if they couldn't pass a screen, they knew they'd never get to the finish line, and they redesigned their chemicals from that step forward. And then it allows you to focus on the ones that are most important. I learned that we had a terrible statute, that TSCA did not work. And the interesting thing about it was how dysfunctional it was actually led to a new statute coming on board. Because what the industry realized is that if some government entity doesn't regulate it, guess what's going to happen? Somebody else will. And you know who regulated it? Walmart. You know why Walmart regulated it? Because it was information like the kind of information you get from Silent Spring that said you shouldn't probably have BPA in baby bottles. So you know what Walmart did? They said, I don't have to regulate. I'm just not going to sell it anymore. Whoa! The reverberations around the chemical industry was extraordinary. And then what else happened was all the developing world is trying to figure out, what do I do to develop and get good products and chemicals? And you know they didn't have EPA to look at to tell them what is good governance and how to regulate. So they were going with the EU model, which is hazard-based, and they don't like it in the chemical industry. So they said, oh my God, we need a new statute, something that works. And we got our first environmental statute in 20 years, which is the Lautenberg bill, and that is good news. It is important. It's good stuff. But take a lesson from it, folks. It came with transparency. It came with information, not necessarily regulation. It came because we weren't regulating, because businesses had uncertainty. That's what this administration doesn't figure out. Businesses don't like uncertainty. There are rules of the road. They want to be protected, and we have rules of the road. We want to be protected, and we need to speak up and tell them that. Okay. I would like to spend a few minutes because on January 20th, 2017, at high noon, a new sheriff came in town. It was Barney Fife, and he left his bullet in his pocket. Because he not only wanted to get rid of the rules of the road, he wanted to make sure that any rules that were remaining we didn't do anything with, right? We didn't enforce. There was a change, and I will admit it's been very hard to watch. Not personally, frankly, because you do the best you can and things change, but it's been hard to watch because I have 3 kids. It's been hard to watch because I live in this country, and I'm embarrassed when I talk to people in other countries who say, what happened to the United States of America? It bothers me that we are seeing absolute attacks on science from both EPA and Congress attacking science. And we see absolutely that the administrator of EPA is looking to make sure that that agency in many ways is not functioning. And the budget that the president put together is looking to make sure that EPA doesn't have the resources that it needs to talk about the most important threats that are facing us today, including the threat of climate change. And we just can't tolerate it. We have to go back to a country that wants to rely on facts, that asks government to develop and support the development of real science so I know what I'm doing, so that I know that my world continues to progress in a healthy and thoughtful way. You know, I just, what is today? This Monday, I was in New York City, and we unveiled a report by Lancet. It was a report that they developed, and it talked about the international burden of pollution. If you haven't seen it, you ought to take a look at it. It was really quite amazing. It was amazing because it significantly underestimated the cost of pollution and its impact. But even what it put out was shocking. It said that 16%, which is 1 out of 6 of the people in the world today, die prematurely because of impact from pollution. 4 million women and children die every year from primitive cook stoves that they're burning in their own homes as a result of our inability to figure out that you need to continue to move forward to get people out of poverty, which is frankly the greatest threat to our environment, and to move that forward. But they also said, we can't really figure out how to count what's happening in developed countries in terms of exposure to pollutants because we don't know, because those are the emerging contaminants that Silent Spring looks at. That 60% doesn't even count industrialized countries in the challenges that we're facing today, including these emerging contaminants, as well as the challenge of climate change, because that would make it numbers that nobody will report, because nobody actually wants to believe it. And in fact, we don't know enough science to be able to calculate that. So the one thing I want to do is not to leave you with the moaning and groaning. I love doing it. If you'd like to stay after school, you could stay after school. We can do it together and hold hands, and instead of singing feelings, we'll sing, I don't know. War is not the answer, whatever, I don't know, we'll sing. But, you know, I don't want to be like the grumpy Gus or the Debbie Downer here, with all due respect to Gus's and Debbies. But But I do want to really make sure that we do touch base on at least some more of the things that are happening, so I can tell you what I think you should be worried about and what not. First of all, your biggest worry is science. The very way in which we do science. Our peer review process is being tested at EPA, and it's being tested in Congress. They literally want to change the way science is done throughout the world and make EPA and other agencies, frankly, an anomaly to that. Not because there's anything wrong with the way we do it, but because the answers that we're providing through science are not the ones that they want to politically hear. And that's distressing. And so we have to worry about that. The systemic damage to EPA I worry about, because a lot of good people are leaving. I think you read an article maybe in the New York Times about the changes that are going on in our chemical world, the fact that as great as the Lautenberg bill was and as much bipartisan support as it had, the foundational rules of that are being changed by folks that are coming in that worked for the chemical industry. And my poor dear people like Wendy, who worked for the agency for 38 years, said, I have to leave because I'm no longer relevant. That's the saddest thing ever. And I need you to pray for them, and I think we should have an adopt an EPA person. Right? And so everybody can send you letters and happy birthdays even when it's not your birthday, so that they can survive through this, because it is very difficult. But the one thing I don't really want you to worry about as much, and it's fun to talk about this because it's shocking, I don't want you to worry so much about the rollbacks. Yes, you can be ticked off about it, but don't spend all your energy there, because the thing like the rollback on the Clean Power Plan, and the rollbacks on the Clean Water Rule and those things, they don't know what they're doing. We did. It's as simple as that. So we will see those things play out in court because we did what the science says, we did what the law says, we did a huge record that actually explains it. We did outreach so that we got 4.3 million comments. And you don't take all that away with 43 pages, 11 pages of legal analysis and think that it's really gonna happen. All right? So relax. Look. When we went to the DC circuit and we were all sued by everybody on the Clean Power Plan, I want you to know one thing. It took 27 single line pages to just list the lawyers that were involved in the litigation. 43 pages to get rid of it? I think not. So listen, we have to just remember that we have voices here. And we have to think about what to do. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a couple of just some words of advice. First of all of you researchers and scientists, you know this at Silent Spring, but many don't. You need to speak in language that people understand. Okay? Make it personal. Nobody does anything unless you can tell them why they personally should care about it. So stop sitting back and saying everything. Say the one thing that you think the person next to you will care about and relate to, because we have to start relating to one another once again. The Environmental Protection Agency was actually put in place by Richard Nixon. In case you've forgotten history, he was Republican, and it was the only good thing he did. So I'm at Harvard School of Public Health saying, okay, all you guys, we need to talk about climate change in a little bit more specific language. And they go, what do you mean? I'm going, okay, here's the IPCC report. This is how they talk about the science behind climate change. They said, this is it. It is very, very likely that anthropogenic emissions are a significant cause of climate change. Okay, have that at a dinner conversation, right? I tell them, okay, here is how you need to describe this. Three little short sentences. Number one, climate change is real. Number two, man-made emissions are causing it. And number three, this is why women need to rule the world. Totally Totally true. Totally true. Totally true. You need to engage with one another, folks. I have friends who can't go to Thanksgiving because there's a Republican at the table, for crying out loud. There's other turkeys. I shouldn't say that. Just kidding, I'm just kidding. We have to get back to bipartisan conversations. Why is science now a partisan issue? Why is climate change a partisan issue? It's a people issue. Let's get back to the core values that created all of these structures, that government was all about, protecting our common values. I worked for 5 Republicans. None of them wanted to drink dirty water. None of them. None of them wanted to see the woman that they love get breast cancer. This is not a partisan issue. We have sunk so low if we make it that. So don't go down there. Take the high road. Talk to your friends. Find a way to relate to anybody that's of any other party, and be respectful again instead of avoiding one another and moving out of neighborhoods so that we can feel good and surround ourselves with like-minded people. That's not what the United States is about. We're a democracy. So have people in your house, talk to them. Get all ideas on the table. You can learn a lot from one another, but the most important thing is you can reconnect as human beings. And that's what we have to do. And really, I have just one other big message in a little quip. My big message is, if you think that when the federal government is asleep, that nothing's happening in the United States, you're so wrong. Because the federal government is often asleep. But we don't sleep. We actually don't. If you look at the issue of climate change, there is not a single step forward the United States government took until the start of the Obama administration. Nothing. Nothing did they do other than to stop it and block it. So stop thinking that everything has gone to hell in a handbasket, one of my mother's favorite sayings. And if anyone knows what that means, I'd appreciate it if you came up and told me. I'm sure we're there, but I don't know what it is. Listen, it's all grassroots stuff. It has to be personal. It's starting at your house, your community. Get involved in your community. Stop allowing people to segregate themselves by partisanship. Remind people that we're in this together. We care about one another. That's what democracy's about. And don't let the United States government at the federal level tell you that this isn't a government of, by, and for the people, because it is, and we're not handing it to anybody. Now, the last 2 things I want to tell you. 2 more things. And this is advice from my dad. He haunts me. I figured I'd share it with everybody else. He told me 2 things in life, and I've followed both of them. The first thing he told me is, Gina, I don't care what you do when you grow up, but fight the good fight. And what he meant was fight something that you are passionate about, that really matters to you. Because that's the fight you're going to last long enough to get rid of the ebbs and flows. And in government, you better have tenacity, or you ain't hanging around and you're getting nothing done. And I think we all need to remind ourselves that we are in a long-term fight, and we have to fight that good fight. And the second thing he used to tell me, and this was when I would come in the house, and I'd be whining about this and that. I know it's hard to believe. As a kid, whine, and finally he'd turn to me and he'd say, Gina, you just have to pull up your big girl pants and do something. So what I am telling you all is, it's time to pull up your big girl pants, pull up your big boy pants, pull up your gender neutral pants, and do something. Thank you very much.